omelette, you know, you make it a chicken salad.
You can do a lot. My wife is making for dinner tonight a bean soup. So it's going to be fresh picked green beans, yellow beans, little potatoes, little milk, cup of broth, onions.
I went to the farm stand yesterday, just
All
loaded
vegetarian
up on
to
stuff.
make up for the ice cream that I just ate.
And then you can go for a bike ride there.
I gotta take a bike ride after eating, having a slice of pizza and eating ice cream. I gotta do that.
Okay.
Yeah. Gotta do that. We have 2 more minutes so we can gab. So Bob Valentine, he fell.
I heard he fell again. I got an email.
Okay.
I was gonna call his daughter last night. I can't remember her married name to save my life. Her first name is Jody. And I don't think it's Gross. One of his children were married to a Gross family, but I don't think it's Jody.
Tammy?
What are you doing out of the mountains, lady?
No, just come down for the day for Bible study.
Well, good.
Go back
There we go.
tomorrow.
Put that right on
You
the
gotta
desk
give
if
us
you
your
want.
sense.
Your turn.
You want the 2 cents.
That's right.
4 cents today.
Got the last sheet of questions.
Oh, yeah, I didn't take them off the
Here we go.
Thanks. How you doing?
Are there any other concerns of prayer besides Bob Valentine?
How's Lewis? He fell again. He's back in the hospital. At least he was yesterday.
We want to pray for Cliff as he's losing weight. He just ran out of breath coming up the stairs. And so I bawled him out, told him, you should use the lift. But we want to pray for him and his health as he's losing weight. We want to pray for Cody, your grandson, as he's looking for a place to live so he can be near Grandpa and Grandma, so that they can be a positive influence on his life. Are there other concerns?
My mom Lynn's doing good, fantastic considering it's high COVID down there in DC. And Joanne's learning how to use laptop.
Hey, alrighty.
And
Very
Carol
good.
Diefendorfer needs your prayers.
What's that?
Carol Diefendorfer needs your prayers.
Carol Diefendorfer. She has quite a few health problems,
Yes.
and so that's important for us to remember her. Who else that we can? Of course, Angelina, if you're already on, we'll also lift you up in prayer. There are others that we.
Well, we could put Pam in prayer since she hasn't made it here today.
Yep, Pam Mackey, and they were here. Pam and Peter were here last week, which is nice. And we also want to remember Jean, who is struggling with her ALS, and so we want to lift her up as well.
Well, I guess and Michael to continue doing what he's supposed to do.
And your son Michael
My
is.
son Michael, he's
he
got a
would,
job now, so that's
continue-
great, God got a job, so, and to continue to pursue counseling.
Good.
Well,
So if you can remember those, we can continue in prayer for those persons. And it's 1 minute after 1, so we'll go ahead and have prayer. Gracious, loving God, we thank you for this weather, for summertime, for every season of the year, because it has its blessings and beauties, and also its challenges. But Lord, we also thank you that we have this day. This is the day that you have made for us to love you, to serve you, to grow in our relationship with you, that we might have greater confidence and greater joy and peace and love in this life. So Lord, just be with us as we study your word. Draw us tighter as a fellowship together. And all those names that we lifted up, we know that you already know who they are and what their needs are. So embrace them in your loving care. And we're ever mindful to give you the praise and the glory and the honor forever and ever. Amen. I welcome those who are present with us this morning, this afternoon, and also those of you who are joining with us from a distance and who might be joining us live. We are also recording our study so that you can also watch it at your leisure and availability. So we welcome you. We're going through the Gospel of John, and we've made it all the way up to chapter 7. So we're going to be looking at chapter 7. So if you turn your Bibles to John chapter 7, there we will begin our study. And again, I'd remind you that if you're watching us online, and if you have any questions or you have any observations that you'd like to share, you may do so by simply texting my cell phone, which is right here, 315-345-6534. That's 315-345-6534. We just left in the previous chapter. Jesus has a prolonged conversation of his identity, and he calls himself the bread of life. It's interesting how he uses that term after he already had fed 5,000 persons and broke bread for them, and they had more than enough to eat. It leads to a discussion of his being the bread of life, and what is really most important. The bread is more than just food, the material things around us, but the bread of life, abundant life, that God wishes for us to possess, is more than just meat or drink and those tangible things we see in our lives. And he's reminding us that I am, he said of himself, I am the bread of life. It's important that he used the term I am, not just because it's natural, he's speaking about himself, I am the bread of life, but also using the phrase I am, because that's how God identified himself to Moses. And he also compared himself to Moses. And so these are intentional aspects that he raised for us to consider. So each of the things that we read about are not there incidentally. They are accidentally. They're there on purpose, intentionally. And so we need to take special note of them. So now we come to, Jesus goes to the Feast of Tabernacles. After this, Jesus went around in Galilee, purposely staying away from Judea, because the Jews there were waiting to take his life. But when the Jewish Feast of Tabernacles was near, Jesus' brothers said to him, you ought to leave here and go to Judea, so that your disciples may see the miracles you do. No one who wants to become a public figure acts in secret, and since you are doing these things, show yourself to the world, for even his own brothers did not believe in him. We got some more folks coming in, so I'm going to take just a little break here. Stay with us if you're online, and while I get some more chairs for us.
I can read.
Well, we got to wait for them to
Oh,
see
okay.
it. So. There you go. Now bring another chair up.
We'll go in the back. We're fine.
Lydia's pulling some in.
I can sit on this.
Okay, so we just need one chair. Take this chair,
One for
take
each.
some others.
One for
Yeah,
each.
okay.
You know what, I'll let you go there. I'll go here. It's right here. Oh, there's a nice comfy chair. You can sit in. Chair.
I'm getting one. Go ahead and bring it up, chairs.
Thank you, dear.
Take this chair. Oh, and it's like this.
Where's the papers
Is
that
there
were
any-
in here?
somebody's-
We want you. Now, here, there. Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Okay, we're good.
So let me,
Nice to see you
we're
again.
looking at John chapter 7.
John 7.
And let me move this over out of your way a little bit.
And I'll begin those first few verses again, so we aren't disconnected from them. This is John chapter 7. After this, Jesus went around Galilee, purposely staying away from Judea because of the Jews. They were waiting to take his life. But when the Jewish Feast of Tabernacles was near, Jesus' brothers said to him, you ought to leave here and go to Judea, so that your disciples may see the miracles you do. No one who wants to become a public figure acts in secret. Since you are doing these things, show yourself to the world. For even his own brothers did not believe him. Go ahead, Charlie. Verse 6.
My time is not yet here. For you any time will do. The world cannot hate you, it hates me, because I testify that its works are evil. You go to the festival. I am not up to go into the festival, because my time has not yet fully come. After he had said this, he stayed in Galilee. However, the brothers had left for the festival, and he went also, not publicly, but in secret. Now at the festival, the Jewish leaders were watching for Jesus and asking, "Where is he?" Among the crowds there was widespread whispering about him, and some said, "He's a good man." The others replied, "No, he deceives the people." No one would say anything publicly about him for fear of the leaders.
Someone else like to read from verse 14?
I'll read.
Thank you, Sharon.
The festival was nearly half over when Jesus went to the temple and began teaching. The Jewish authorities were greatly surprised and said, "How does this man know so much when he has never been to school?" Jesus answered, "What I teach is not my own teaching, but it comes from God who sent me. Whoever is willing to do what God wants will know whether what I teach comes from God or whether I speak on my own authority. Those who speak on their own authority are trying to gain glory for themselves. But he who wants glory for the one who sent him is honest, and there is nothing false in him. Moses gave you the law, didn't he? But not one of you obeys the law. Why are you trying to kill me? You have a demon in you," the crowd answered. "Who is trying to kill you?" Someone else wrote.
About 21? You want to do that? Sure. 21, right?
Yep.
Jesus replied, "I did one miracle on the Sabbath, and you were amazed. But you work on the Sabbath too, when you obey Moses' law of circumcision. Actually, this tradition of circumcision began with the patriarchs, long before the law of Moses. For if the correct time for circumcising your son falls on the Sabbath, you go ahead and do it, so as not to break the law of Moses. So why should you be angry with me for healing a man on the Sabbath? Look beneath the surface so you can judge correctly."
Very good. We're going to stop there and then consider these verses at this point.
Alrighty.
I sent out earlier in the week to everyone a list of questions, and I think it would be good to look at them and review them. Verse 1, is it surprising to you that Jesus had brothers?
Yeah, that was to me.
It wasn't.
You know, for Roman Catholics, and I know that Pam comes from a Roman Catholic upbringing, they're taught that Mary not only was a virgin when she conceived of Jesus, but it wasn't just an immaculate conception, but she lived an immaculate life, which means that even though she was married to Joseph, they never came together and they never had children. There's been the Protestant understanding that that is not true. We find in the book of Acts that actually the head of the church, the first church in Jerusalem, was James, the Lord's brother. And so we know that, Joseph was a carpenter, Jesus was the firstborn. And so one of the things we have to ask ourselves, why was it that Jesus didn't begin his earthly ministry until he was 30? The reason for that is that he had brothers and sisters, born of Joseph and Mary. And at this time, sometime, and we don't know when, we see Joseph only involved in things when Jesus was 12. But even at another occasion, when Jesus was teaching and they're accusing him of being possessed by a demon, his mother and brothers came in order to secure his health. They had heard, they were told that he was not eating. And so they came to intervene because they were concerned about his health. But we do not read of anything of Joseph. Joseph drops off the map. Somewhere after Jesus was 12, maybe he was 13, 14, 18 maybe, Joseph died. We don't know how or why, but he's no longer in the picture. And so Jesus, being the oldest son, he had the responsibility of taking care of Mary, and also taking care of his siblings. And there might have been sisters as well, brothers and sisters. One of them we know was James, called the Lord's brother. And so that's an interesting thing that we see. Why some people feel that she never had sexual intercourse after Jesus was born, I don't know, except for maybe a fear that people would say, see, she had other children, so why should we believe that Jesus was of God and, miraculously conceived and born? So the best way of protecting that would be to say she was a virgin all through the rest of her life.
That's what the Catholics say, yes, she was.
Right, it would open the door it would open the doors to deception and disbelief,
Deception,
especially through
disbelief.
the Catholic
But
Church.
the Bible did say specifically in the Bible that that's why Joseph waited until after the baby was born to have relations with his wife.
That's right, Debbie.
But you gotta remember, the Catholics weren't allowed to
No, they
read
wouldn't.
the Bible.
That's right. You're right. I knew that. I knew you'd say that.
Debbie brings up a good point, in that it is specifically mentioned in the Gospels that Joseph waited to consummate the marriage until after Jesus was born. And that's in there intentionally, to have them realize that there's no hanky-panky, that Jesus was truly conceived of the Holy Spirit, and that we could trust that record. But again, trusting that record only means that we have to trust the witnesses who are reporting this. So we live by faith and not by sight. We also, it's interesting, when Jesus was dying on the cross, what did he do? He was the eldest son still.
He asked John to take care of his mother.
He asked John, the very author of this gospel, well, not the author, but the one who composed, that wrote down what was inspired to him. He then writes down that, John, your mother, your son.
No.
He gave the responsibility for the care of his own mother, not to the next in line, but to John. John had a particular close relationship. He was a younger disciple, but he had a close relationship with Jesus. He's even portrayed as laying against Jesus at the table, and even in Da Vinci's painting, we see that he's leaning against Jesus. He was referred to himself, instead of first person, he referred to himself in the gospel as the one Jesus loved. It's not to say that Jesus didn't love the others, but there's a special bond between John and Jesus, maybe because of his age. But it's an interesting thing to see. And we also find the reason, why would he give the responsibility to John? He trusted John. But also it's found, where the answer is found right here. Because verse 5 says, for even his own brothers did not believe in him. Sometime after his crucifixion, sometime after his resurrection, sometime, somehow, I'd love to have the witness of how his brother came to say, man, all these years, this big brother that bossed me around and made me toe the line, he is the Messiah. He is the Lord of life. He is my Lord. Something happened. That would have been an interesting witness. I'd love to have heard that.
I wonder if they figured they had it made then, since their big brother was the Messiah. They had a direct in.
Yes. So we also see within this passage that they're a little skeptical of their brother. I mean, why not? I mean, you got a big brother, you have a dad that's gone, and he assumes the role of patriarch of the family. He's the one that has to continue. He was a carpenter, learned his father's business. He probably did carpentry work, supported his family, and you know, when you have a big brother giving you orders,
He probably did some disciplining too.
he probably did some disciplining too. So that is very true. What are some of the implications of this? Does it surprise you that his own brothers would not believe in him?
Yeah,
Does
because
that surprise
they
you?
saw him do miracles. How could they not believe?
Well, in the Catholic Church, there's some other writings that are not part of the Gospels that describe some miraculous things that he did, like making some birds come to life that had been killed and things like this. We do not necessarily trust those accounts, and so they're not in the canon, meaning the recognized passage of Scripture. They're part of the Apocrypha.
But
the
Jesus,
additional readings.
yeah, Jesus was accomplishing things that the brothers couldn't or haven't done.
Well, sometimes
So that-
it's hard to believe what your own family does.
That's right.
I was gonna say, but they saw right here, it says, you can't become famous if you hide like this. If you can do such wonderful things, show yourself to the world.
Okay, so
So
that
why
becomes one of
would
the
they
questions.
believe then if
They're
they're
kind of
showing him?
daring him to do it.
Okay, they're daring him. What is their concern? That's one of the questions. What is their motivation behind advising him to go to Jerusalem at the time of the feast to
Well, I
make
don't-
himself known?
I
So
don't
what
think
was
they want him
what
killed.
was their motivation for themselves?
Well, if he's famous or well known,
Oh.
that's.
Maybe they want him to prove himself.
Okay, they might have wanted him to prove himself. They might have heard these claims from him, but they had a hard time believing these claims. I mean, this is our older brother, you know.
Yeah.
But why else might he wanted him?
Well, they may not have been in witness of all these miracles either. The disciples were, but his family may not have seen the miracles that he was creating.
Now, the first miracle was performed, according to the Gospel of John, at Cana
At
of
Cana.
Galilee at a wedding
At a
feast.
Wedding feast.
These were the first of his miraculous signs.
And I'm assuming the brothers were at that wedding if he was there and Mary was there.
Right.
So they saw that.
But
So I
they may
don't know
not
why
have
they
known
would
where the
believe.
wine came from.
They might have been busy with the rest of the families and enjoying the wine and the
Right.
feast and not really paying attention. Mary, though, remembered, hey, I know what my boy could do, and went to him and spoke to him. And all of a sudden, the wine came, and yeah, leave it to my big brother to be able
To do the miracle.
well, wouldn't necessarily call it a miracle. They would say, yeah, took care of business.
Taking care of business.
You know, I mean, that's what his role in the family was after Joseph died. He was taking care of business.
But
So, yeah, he took
They
care of
didn't
this
tell the
too.
people that this wine came from Jesus. So the wine was just suddenly there.
Yeah,
So who knew where it came from?
right. So we,
Maybe there was a little jealousy there. Maybe there's
Jealousy.
like, oh, he's the big brother, everybody likes Jesus.
but
you
what's
know,
the
and
benefit of having a big brother who becomes famous?
It reflects
Then
on you.
people like you too, I mean, they
Oh, you
Right.
got a lot of
associate you with
the
them.
perks.
It opens doors, doesn't
Opening
it?
doors.
You know, it opens doors for you. So of course, you know, I don't believe that in what some people say you are, and I don't necessarily believe that. But if you become a popular public figure, hey, that's good for us. I mean, after all, we're sons and daughters of a carpenter too. Okay, if anything, it might boost our carpenter business. You know, so they have other motivations in mind, and but that's the only thing that we can suppose. We
But-
don't have documentation.
Wouldn't it they've been worried if the people are looking to kill him?
Well,
Because I wouldn't think they'd want him killed.
they might have seen that the crowds were drawn to him, and they might have felt that the crowds would protect him.
Yeah, he
And
had-
by his
Yeah, right.
his facing the crowd, I mean, those who were against him, might even raise him in popularity. I mean, if you want to become a popular figure, you know, go on Facebook, go on TV, and make a big stink about something. Okay, Now, those who do something good are not necessarily highlighted by the media.
And the feast had a variety of people there. All different types of all different groups were there. So that Jesus would write both good and positive and
Yep.
different faiths, different
So it was an opportunity they saw. Okay, you become famous, we then will also benefit from it. There was not a concern for the brother's life as much. I'm sure you didn't want him to die. But you know, we think of Joseph and his brothers. They got kind of envious of Joseph, didn't they? Right? I mean, in fact, one of them decided, well, we don't want to kill him. They were going to kill him. Instead, we'll give him these Midianite traders to take him down to Egypt, make him a slave, get him out of the way. So sibling rivalry is something that we can understand. It is something that exists. And we shouldn't necessarily think that the Holy Family was just perfect and never had any bumps in the road.
Right.
Now that's comforting to me. I don't know about you, because my family had bumps in the road, okay, and sometimes still does. And it's nice to know that Jesus knew everything, or we claim that he knew every possible human trial and suffering, even that of being part of a family that didn't always get along. To me, that's comforting. Okay. But we have to read between the lines. Now, I'm not saying that everything that I'm reading into it is correct, but I'm using other passages of Scripture to try to fill in the pieces. And so Jesus left Mary into John's care initially because he knew he could trust John. He didn't know if he could trust James. And we don't know whether any of the other brothers or sisters came to faith either. Yeah? All we know of is James, the Lord's brother. And that's in the book of Acts. We already covered, what do you think was their motivation for encouraging Jesus to go to the feast in Jerusalem even though the Jews were waiting to take his life? Here's a question. What did John mean by the Jews wanting to take his life? Who were the Jews that he was referring to?
People of Israel, no? There's the
Or
chosen.
the people in power.
The people in power. So he was talking about the religious establishment.
Oh, okay.
He was talking, if we can compare it in some churches, the board.
That didn't
Pharisees and Sadducees.
that didn't like what he was spewing out to the crowds. Didn't like what he was saying.
It wasn't the common people
No.
who were also Jews.
It was the leaders.
Because
of the
those who
area.
would go to the Feast of Tabernacles were Jews.
Yeah, what is that feast? Because I couldn't find any information on it.
The Feast of the Tabernacles, an obligatory feast that all Jews that live within 15 miles of Jerusalem are supposed to attend. It's held at the end of September and beginning of October and lasts for 8 days.
And what is the purpose of it?
It's a time when the Jews are all supposed to come in and get together and socialize.
What they also did during the Tabernacles, it represented and honored their time in the wilderness when they had to build shelters and live in them. So those who keep that feast even to this day will make for themselves huts on their roof or outside their house, and they'll live in them during that time just to remember what their ancestors had to endure during their 40 years of wandering through the wilderness. So it became a feast to remember that. It was a feast though, because what happened during their time in the wilderness? God provided manna from heaven, water from the rock, and quail. God miraculously provided for them. So by actually living this out, I know my little grandchildren really want to go camping. My granddaughters do because my grandsons got to go camping with mom and dad. And so now they're a little jealous. Oh, that fits into this. So Grandpa has a tent. So Grandpa said, okay, as soon as it dries out, because we've had rain, I'll put up the tent out in the yard. And Mom also said that, because their mom, you can sleep out in the tent. on a good night with your father. I'm going to be with Kathy in my bed, okay? But Dad can go out and sleep in the tent.
In the
It's
wilderness.
exciting for
The
them.
wilderness.
Yes.
Well,
Now,
he's a
just
very smart
imagine, though,
daughter.
if you're a young child, you hear these stories of your heritage. But then you also dramatically experience them in a smaller way. And that's what the feast was. And it was for if you're living around 15 miles.
But they said many of the devout Jews came from much further away.
Yes. Yes. So,
Yeah, my friend who was Jewish never talked about that, so I don't know. She probably knew about it, but she did not observe that particular feast.
if you were expected as a Jew, if you're a good Jew, a Jew in good standing, okay, you had to make a pilgrimage no matter where you were, and they were all over the place, just as they are now. They were expected to make a pilgrimage back to Jerusalem, either for the Passover particularly, in their lifetime, at least once in their lifetime, or any of the other feasts or festivals. And so this was one of those obligatory ones, one of those that was kind of expected, and they plan on that, and they would then go to those feasts, and there would be sacrifices and other things that would happen then. It was a great celebration. So Jesus would want to go to that. He didn't have to because he was in Galilee. And we find in the Gospel of John that Jesus doesn't just go to Jerusalem once. We kind of get the hint from Matthew, Mark, Luke that he went to Jerusalem more like once, and that was during the time of the Passover, and then he wound up giving up his life. John has him going to Jerusalem and leaving Jerusalem, coming back to Jerusalem several times.
There's sometime in here where they say that he can't be the Messiah because he's from Galilee.
Right.
And they're supposed to be from the house of David, but he was from the house of David and born in Bethlehem.
Right. But
They
while he
didn't
was
know.
born in Bethlehem, he went to Egypt. Okay, remember? And after they came back from Egypt, they made their way back to Galilee, to Nazareth. And that's where he was raised.
Oh,
Okay? So all they would have known him as this carpenter's son,
from Galilee.
son of Joseph, from Galilee, from Nazareth.
not
And
the
that's
good
why
kind of
Nathaniel,
Nazareth.
Right. But then,
when he was
right.
called to follow, said, Nazareth? Can anything good come from Nazareth?
But then, but then after that, he left all the carpentry trade that he knew was there, and just kept traveling from place to place to place to be with new people and new surroundings
That's correct.
for further teachings.
And also the impact that he had in Galilee was because people in Galilee were more hot-blooded and hot-headed, more easily to stir up and get involved in things like that, more so than the people in Jerusalem.
So there's a question here that I provided for you. What was Jesus' response to his brother's suggestion?
What was his, what?
His response to his brother's suggestion that he should go up and he should make himself known publicly at the feast. Because there'd be a lot of people there from all over, right?
Well, he said it wasn't the right time, it wasn't his time. Right?
Okay. So what do you mean by that?
He wasn't ready to
Well,
go
God has a
public.
plan for him, and at certain times he's supposed to do certain things. And, they wanted to kill him, but it wasn't his time. Even when he went, no one touched him, because God protected him. Because it wasn't the time that God had planned. And I mean, it's God's plan takes over, guys. Sorry, you can do whatever you want, but you're not in charge.
Jesus meant by the time. Go ahead, Hannah.
Wait, if he went when his brothers went, which was at the beginning of the festival, this would be very public, and the people that were looking for him would find him, because they were searching for him during the beginning of the festival. He wasn't ready to go public, he went private.
So that's a good explanation of why he changed his mind. What he was looking at is he went at the beginning of the festival, they then would look for him, they could remove him, and then they could precipitate his execution. Okay? And then that would prevent the fullness of his ministry from being
Because he wanted to
completed.
teach, he wanted to do some teaching.
He had teaching and he had miracles yet to do before his time, his understanding of what his time was going to be. He knew he was going to give his life, but there was a time in which he was going to be able to give his life. That was not the time.
Well, there were things he wanted to accomplish before he gave his life.
That's correct. Now, so why did he change his mind?
Did he change his mind? Or did he just say, what he was really saying to them is, I'm not ready to go public. But in his mind, he was saying, I'm going to privately slip in there and accomplish what I need to do. So it may not have been that he changed his mind. It may be just that he had his own plan, and he wasn't going to tell his brothers what it was.
And he
That's
didn't want to
interesting.
go with his brothers, I don't think. He wanted
No, because they would
to
find
go
it
by
that way.
himself.
So what we find, I think what you said, Bonnie, is very significant. God has a plan. Jesus, being God, fully human, but also being fully God, has an understanding of timing and the plan. And so he had the plan that I'm going to play this game on my terms, not on their terms, not on your terms. We see that Jesus has control of the circumstance. Even when he gave his life, some would say, oh, he lost control.
No, he had
No.
total control.
He had full control. He knew exactly what he was doing, his time. He knew when his time is.
Well, the commentary I read basically said that he didn't tell Jesus what to do. He had his own mind about what he was going to do and how he was going to do it.
And so he was fulfilling what he knew he needed to do. And I also think, like Bonnie said, that he intended to go halfway through the feast. Why? Because if he was there at the beginning, they were waiting for him. Now, oh, he didn't show. Oh, that coward, you know. So then, so then what happened is all of a sudden he makes himself known halfway through the feast. That was not accidental either. Okay? Because he took them by surprise. They weren't prepared. And then by that time, he was already teaching the crowd. And what did the crowd say of him?
He's a good man.
He's a good man.
Or he deceives people.
So they were divided in their opinion. Some would have agreed with the Jewish leaders. Some would have said, no, this may be the guy. And so the Jews then, or the Jewish leadership, would have been frightened to intervene for fear of the crowd. Because the crowd may want to say, we want to hear him out. We want to make our own decision. We want to choose.
Well, they were astounded that he knew so much and he'd never been
Learn
taught, like a rabbi is taught for years.
Right.
He didn't have that teaching. He's a carpenter's son. How does he know all this?
So they had a mixture of belief, but people like to make their own mind up. They don't like being told what to believe. I hope that will be the case in our culture today. You know, instead of taking what you hear and see in the news or whatever, find out and get facts and make your decision. Don't be like sheep led away.
I think that's what I was just gonna say. That I think that's what we're facing today is that, but God's still there. God's still here. God still sees what's occurring. It's like, and it's gonna backfire against the leaders if you're not careful.
Yeah. We're not talking about any particular
No,
leaders. We're just saying
no.
against the whole group of them.
Against all leaders.
Yes. You know, but let's hope that. So he is intentionally because he's here. Oh, go tell the other guys he's here. But he's already teaching the crowd.
Yes.
What can they do now? Now they're interested. He played his game. He played his cards
And the
right.
and the crowd likes some of what they're hearing.
Yeah, they wanted to hear more. So they couldn't do anything really at that time. How does he face the threat to his life? That's the next question that I had. See, verse 14 says, not until halfway through the feast did Jesus go up to the temple courts and begin to teach. The Jews, that's the leadership, were amazed and asked how this man gets such learning without having studied. Studied with any of the famous rabbis of the time, Gamaliel, Hillel or what any of those. And Jesus didn't even allow them. They asked the question. He answered for them. What was his answer?
Well, he said, what I'm teaching you is not mine. It's from God. It's God's word.
Now, how do you respond to that, you Jewish experts? Well, then show me what I'm teaching is contrary to what you've already received from Moses and the patriarchs. He put the burden of proof back on them.
And then he told them how they broke Moses' law and that they're reprimanding him for breaking Moses' law.
Because he healed on the Sabbath.
So
So
they
he's
do
all,
circumcision on the Sabbath, which, because they have to do, 8 days?
yeah, after a child was born.
So, if it falls on the Sabbath,
And that wasn't the law of Moses. That came before the
that
law.
came,
Because circumcision was given to Abram. And if you remember that, so he began circumcision, that's how you mark a Hebrew from all these other cultures. But then all of a sudden, Moses got himself in trouble. Because even though God called him and he was heading back to Egypt to do what God wanted him to do, all of a sudden, something happened and he had to circumcise his own sons. Remember? He was breaking the tradition from Abram. You couldn't serve and help teach the Jewish people that they were distinctive from Abraham if you weren't even following what made you a Jew. And so his wife complained to him, yeah, you're my husband of blood, referring to circumcision. And a lot easier if you get circumcised when you're born than later on. So anyways, I wouldn't know that. I just would presume that would be true. I don't want to know that.
Same assumption.
they automatically do them in the hospital unless you say you don't want it done.
But our insurance doesn't pay for it because it's considered a cosmetic thing.
Yeah.
Paid for my boys.
But
Depends
that's
on
anymore.
insurance.
Doesn't
Really?
Yeah, something. So anyways, he's showing them their duplicity. So when you show them their duplicity, and not just they are hearing it, but all the other people are hearing him teach. And the Jewish leaders were not necessarily, the common people didn't always like their Jewish leaders. Okay? They were suspicious of them. So here this guy is who's showing their deficiencies, their duplicities. Do you think they're going to jump up and grab Jesus and do their bidding? No way, Jose. He was in control and command. He picked the right time. He knew what he was saying. And so he's putting forth that question, my knowledge comes from God. So do you really learn? Are you really educated in what is really important in life by going to and getting a degree from Cornell or SU or Oxford or Yale or Duke
Or by just living your life.
Real wisdom is seen in what one believes and what one follows.
Yeah, I say my son is very intelligent. He has masters from Yale. Really smart. But he has what did we say, Ray? He has no common sense whatsoever.
You can't
I mean,
teach
he's as
nonsense.
dumb as a rock sometimes, I swear. And yet
She is your mother, so if you see this, you've got to accept that she's your mother, just for you.
He's highly educated, but, examples when he broke down, he was supposed to get a part repaired in his car in Seattle. He wouldn't do it, didn't believe him. He broke down in Graybull, Wyoming, had to be towed to Billings, Montana, and spent over a week waiting for the part. So his $300 part ended up costing him over $1,500. So,
Well, in the new discussions about education, which may come about with all this virtual learning, is that similar to what you brought up, is that there's an awful lot of degrees out there, but they don't really know hills of beans sometimes. Maybe colleges should be aiming more at things that
How to live your
our
life.
community and world needs. It's like or it ends in some kind of a career, or it ends in some kind of a knowledge at the end, instead of just, here's your diploma, lots of luck, you're off.
My comment is not meant I'm anti-education. I think
No, I
we
didn't
should
mean-
get
I didn't mean it
education.
that way either.
I expect the doctor that's gonna treat me to be educated and
But
have a
sometimes,
license.
but sometimes the plumbers and electricians know just as much as a 6-year college grad.
Well, there's knowledge of life.
Yeah.
And there's knowledge of being able to do certain things. And I like to draw the analogy to the history of Abraham Lincoln.
He was self-taught.
He was self-taught.
By
Wasn't
candlelight.
distant learning,
Candlelight
but he
fire.
was
You
self-taught.
can learn anything if you want to, Ben.
One of my favorite theologians, A.W. Tozer. And he earned 2 doctor's degrees, but he never went to school for them. His natural knowledge, his self-learning, his writing, his publications, he became the editor of a denominational magazine, accredited him. You didn't doubt the proficiency of his knowledge, his command of knowledge. It didn't come from necessarily sitting in the classroom. And that should also be comforting to us. Because while we may think, well, I didn't go to seminary, or like I did, or I didn't go this and I didn't go that, who am I to know and say what the Bible really says? But you see, we can understand what God's truth is. And we can even have a better command on this, right, Cliff, than someone who has all sorts of degrees. I've listened to some people that had all sorts of degrees, and I said under my breath, "Oh, what a bunch of bunk." Truth is truth, and deception is deception.
Well, part of that, Brian, is your gift of discernment. How do I learn to handle the information and take it under advisement and use it properly?
Yes.
And what I have seen, the people that had the biggest impact on my life were the Bill Ballards, Mr. Zuki, people that you would talk to, and then they would come back with a comment or a question that would pull you into thinking. And the other thing is the discipline to it and commitment.
Yes. So there's education is important, qualifications are important, but there's also in the area of the subjectivity of life
Yeah.
and those type of things and values cannot necessarily be taught.
Don't you, I have had a fear about so much online learning right now, and it looks like that might continue on for a while. These children are learning, but they're gonna have no social skills. And once they get out, they're gonna be book smart and street stupid, because they're gonna be out there and not know how to socialize with other, how to go out and look for a job. They're not gonna know how to talk to people.
One of the problems is that not having to do with the children or distance learning, it has to do with their parents. And you've got parents who cannot give the full time to being able to teach and instruct. I've had some parishioners who were homeschooled, but even being homeschooled, they had associations and they went and they had social interaction, they had social interaction
That's
at
it,
church.
for the homeschoolers, they have a whole community.
But you have to have the quality of education will fall upon the parents. What am I willing to sacrifice to make sure that they're gonna get the education and the socialization? I know even with our 4-year-old Lydia, well, probably, of course, my daughter's a teacher. She'll be taught at home instead of going to school this fall. But at the same time, she just finished a week of Christian ballet camp. She had social interaction. My daughter will make sure that she has that. But then you see my daughter is a teacher, but she's also home. and Daniel is off working. How many parents are gonna be able to do that? And to pay their mortgage and other
I don't know
things?
what I would have done if this had happened when I was working, because I
It's
was
difficult,
a
isn't
single
it?
mother. You know.
So I made it.
I believe the schools ought to
To stay
open.
home.
And I think there's, we have such technical ability and creativity. We can't solve that problem. I think we can. It's a matter of not wanting to apply ourselves. And I do think the children are in jeopardy, because it's not going to be children like my granddaughter, my grandsons. It's not going to be those children that are going to be injured. It's going to be those children that do not have the parents at home, that do not have, so all of a sudden you're going to go off and you're going to work half a day. Or you're going to do distance working. I know when I work at home, and I do a lot of work at home, when I have a little one interrupting me, it doesn't help me get my work done. And likewise, if I didn't have other people there, I wouldn't be able to interact and take care of that child. So who's going to suffer? There's going to be a certain segment of our society who is going to suffer because of this. So it's not going to be equal. It's not going to be fair.
There's certain parents that can't help their children.
That's right.
In other words, they don't have the education or the understanding, and probably
Or the
the
patience.
Or the patience.
Yeah,
Yes.
patience is the big deal. A lot of parents don't want to be home with their kids.
That's right.
I made the choice to be home until they were until they entered high school.
This is an interesting conversation as it fits into our society.
It's the same way with Christian Bible experiences. If the parents don't know it, who's gonna teach them?
That's just it. That's why we used to complain in certain churches that parents would not come to church. They just drop their kids off for education. They take off, and not realizing that part of their children's education is what they see at home.
Right.
And if they have mom and dad that don't take it seriously, why should I take it seriously?
And I saw nothing at home, so.
But thank God, God was in your life.
But yeah, he was there, nudging me.
Yeah.
And I really think all learning, and especially learning about God, it's a lifetime. You never stop. You never know it all. You never know everything. So you have to learn and study the rest of your life.
The biggest
And,
problem.
and this is a question that Angelina writes to us. Was the Joseph from Arimathea a different Joseph? Yes.
Yes.
Joseph was a common name. Actually, Jesus was a common name. I once had a workman that was working on my house a couple of years ago, and his name was Jesus, and it really surprised me. I was in my house, and I heard the foreman say, "Hey, Jesus!" And I went out and said, "I've got some younger children here. I wish you wouldn't swear." And all of a sudden, Jesus lowered his head, and he had long hair, and he says, "Well, I'm Jesus." Yes, so Jesus, Joseph of Arimathea was a different
I thought
Joseph.
they often went as Jesus.
Jesus. Well, and that's a Latino name. Jesus is still or Jesus is a very common name.
Yeah.
And so that's the answer, Angelina. Thank you for that one, though, because that led to a nice laugh.
Well, now we know she's with us.
She's with us. We know you're with us.
No,
Thank you.
Brian, as I was gonna say, back to the school situation, all these kids have special needs are the ones that are really going to be suffering.
And do you know how many children have special needs? A great number are being found that have special needs.
Right.
And then the greater proportion of those who have special needs are people in poor families, in which moms and dads, if they work, they have to work. There's not going to be someone at home unless there's grandparents to be able to fill into that. And are they going to be able to take care of that? So not having schools open is not just injurious to their education in the future, but I also think to their health. A lot of children are being fed. They don't get fed at home unless they go to school. And I know I see Tammy shaking her head because she's a social worker. And she understands, she's seen those homes and those environments. And that's not judgmental against people, it's just a reality. And politically, we can throw around kids' lives. But it's only going to do us a disservice as a culture. So,
Did you used to go at 8 in the morning to visit some of your families? Our social worker said that was the best time to go, 7 to 8 in the morning,
I worked up for it.
before the fathers woke up or the man in the
So
house
I
woke
would like
up.
to, as we get back into this, Jesus said to them, I did one miracle that they were aware of, and they criticized him. So his time is that he had to do other miracles. So let's pick up at verse 25, because I want to try to finish this chapter. There you go. Nope, got a little bit of time. Let's go ahead and read from verse 25. Someone want to read there?
Some-
Okay. Division over who Jesus is. At that point, some of the people of Jerusalem began to ask, "Isn't this the man they are trying to kill? Here he is speaking publicly, and they're not saying a word to him. Have the authorities really concluded that he is the Messiah? But we know where this man is from. When the Messiah comes, no one will know where he is from." Then Jesus, still teaching the temple courts, cried out, "Yes, you know me, and you know where I am from. I am not here on my own authority, but he who sent me is true. You do not know him, but I know him because I am from him, and he sent me." At this they tried to seize him, but no one laid a hand on him, because his hour had not yet come. Still many in the crowd believed in him. They said, "When Messiah comes, will he perform more signs than this man?" The Pharisees heard the crowds whispering such things about him. Then the chief priests and the Pharisees sent temple guards to arrest him. Jesus said, "I am with you for only a short time, and then I am going to the one who sent me. You will look for me, but you will not find me, and where I am, you cannot come." The Jews said to one another, "Where does this man intend to go that we cannot find him? Will he go where our people live, scattered among the Greeks, and teach the Greeks? What did he mean when he said, 'You will look for me, but you will not find me, and where I am, you cannot come'?"
Okay, answer that question. They asked that question. So, what did he mean when he said that you will look for me, but you will not find me, and where I am, you cannot come?
It's heaven.
He's going with his father.
With the Father, yes.
Going up to heaven.
And you'll look for me and not find me, because you're not going to look for me in the right place.
Because they don't believe it.
That's right. Okay. Now I want to say this about this section here. Instead of taking it apart piece by piece, we don't need to. We find that reason why they couldn't arrest Jesus or take him because they had conflict within the crowd. And you think the crowd's going to let it just happen easily? No, because they were uncertain. And they're talking as much between each other, and they're questioning, well, why didn't they arrest him? Well, he's here now. So do they believe he's the one? If he believes he's the one, if they believe that he's the one, should we also then consider him to be the one? So there's a lot of, Jesus is using, and you notice his responses they're direct, but they're more rhetorical. What they do is they ask for your opinion. What are you going to say? What are you going to conclude? Instead of him just answering for them. Because that kept them in conversation. And that also prevented them from saying, okay, let's get him now.
But his time had not yet come, and God was protecting him.
God was protecting him. And Jesus was God in human flesh, so, Jesus was protecting him. God was protecting him. The God in Jesus was protecting him. So how he was responding was also part of that protection, okay? Which is very good. And he also makes another implication that I want to lift up. I've had a great deal of theological education, and I've listened to a lot of people teach. I've heard a lot of different people's opinions on different things. But there are some teachers that knew a lot about Jesus. But the ones that most influenced my life were not those who knew a lot about Jesus or the Bible, but knew Jesus. You understand what I mean? So you can have all this knowledge up here, but if you have this knowledge up here and you don't have the knowledge here, you're not living it. The greatest teachers I've had, and I can tell you the names, I can tell you the stories, but I won't, were those that live it. Okay? And I was more impressed. I was impressed by their opinions about what they taught because of what they lived. That taught me more. And I also have known some people who didn't have a great deal of formal education, theologically. But they were right on the money what their beliefs were, and they lived those beliefs, and they proved the veracity of those beliefs by what I saw in their lives. So if I had to choose who I was going to follow and listen to, degrees are important in some way, but I'm going to look at the fruit in your life. Now, you notice I said fruit of your life. That means, how does the truth impact and influence your life?
How they live is more important than what they say.
That's correct. And I can have people that could say a lot of stuff, but I didn't see the fruit in their lives. And I'm going to follow the one I see the fruit in their lives. So I want to continue on with that. Finally, the temple guards went back to the chief priests and Pharisees, who asked them, "Why didn't you bring him in?" Yeah, let's pass the buck. Timmy picked up on that one right away. Yeah, you guys. No one ever spoke this way as this man does, the guards declare. So even the guards are saying, "Hey, I don't know about this. If he's really the one, I'm not going to go up against the Messiah. I'm not going to have God strike me dead." Okay. "You mean he has deceived you also?" the Pharisees retorted. "Has any of the rulers of the Pharisees believed in him?" "No. But this mob that knows nothing of the law, there's a curse on them." So you see, they're elitists. We're the ones that can tell the truth.
But Nicodemus believed in him.
That's just
He was
it.
a Pharisee.
Angelina, you mentioned Joseph of Arimathea. He was part of the ruling council. He believed in Jesus. Nicodemus, who we met in chapter 3 of John's Gospel, he believed in Jesus. And so they went and they secured his body and took care of Jesus after his crucifixion. And what happened is, when they tried Jesus, and we get to that, they didn't include everyone. What they did is they met unlawfully at night and at a private residence. That was against the rules of the temple. And they broke those rules because it was convenient to them. Right? Yes. And we oftentimes can see that in our own world. And so they excluded Nicodemus or Joseph of Arimathea. They might have been there, but many others who would have been supportive of Jesus and not condemned him were not there. It was a monkey court. It was set up. And anyways, Nicodemus, verse 50, who had gone to Jesus early and who was one of their own number, asked, "Does our law condemn anyone without first hearing him to find out what he is doing?" So he wasn't coming out and saying, "I believe in him," but he was protecting Jesus, right? Because he didn't want to have the attack turn on him. Okay? They replied, "Are you from Galilee too? Look into it, and you will find that a prophet does not come out of Galilee."
What they have against Galilee?
A lot of insurrection over periods of time happened in Galilee. Okay, we find that when the nation split after Solomon, northern Israel, southern Israel. Northern Israel fell first. That's the area where Galilee is, and they were also oftentimes, Babylon, the Assyrians, Babylonians. They were the source. They were the first to be attacked and subdued. Jerusalem fell, and Judah and Benjamin fell last. Okay, so there's always an air of controversy and conflict there. And also realize there's the Valley of the Kings, it's called there, and that's where every spring the kings would go out and fight their wars. Okay, and so you'd have kingdoms from way up north and come down, because this was, Transjordan was the place where you went through to get southward to Africa. And so that's why this was always under great contention. Okay. So that's the reason why they would say that. No prophet came from there, because from Galilee you had northern Israel historically, and they rejected Jerusalem and the line of David. Okay?
Oh, okay.
And so what happens, so you can't trust anything. Does any profit come from there? No, it's got to come from us. So you have to go to the right school. You had to go to the right place for training to be reliable. So you get the drift of that? So some things have never changed, have they?
No.
Yes. And some things will never change. So, I always times think of these times, I probably will look for it and try to watch it. Mr. Smith goes to Washington.
Oh,
Remember
right.
that?
Yes, I remember that.
And he didn't have the qualifications either. And he was looked down upon because he lacked those qualifications.
And that movie's in black and white.
And that's in black and white.
Right. It's a
But it
old
also
movie.
emphasizes this, that just because you're part of a certain class, certain education, certain credentials, how many people with certain credentials have done evil and terrible things?
Well, our forefathers never meant that somebody should be in Congress for 30 years. They're supposed to go and serve a term or 2 terms, and then go home and take care of business at home.
Well, you also got to realize that most of those signers of the Declaration of Independence were of the age they didn't expect to live 30 more years.
They didn't live as long back
But
then.
also they had plantations and estates and things
Take
to
care of.
care for. They didn't want to spend all that time dealing with that stuff in Washington. They had to go home and take care of
That's right.
their property and their money.
So we went through chapter 7, that's what I wanted to do, and I'd have you go ahead and read through chapter 8. And think about the things we discussed today. I think they're relevant. There's principles to apply. But read through chapter 8, and I will send out Monday or Tuesday. I will send out, again, a list of questions as we prepare
You
for
haven't finished this
John
week's
8.
questions, have you?
Yeah, most of it.
Almost.
Let's have a word of prayer. Gracious living God, we thank you as we live in a time of turmoil. We know that this is nothing new under the sun, and even Solomon, who wrote in Ecclesiastes, is there anything new under the sun? What has been, will be, and will be again. And so it is that while the circumstances may differ, the tools of evil may have changed, yet at the same time, we have not progressed or evolved as human beings. You are concerned with the type of persons that we are. And so, Lord, we look to you. Guide us, shape us, mold us. Keep us striving to learn more about you and to become more like Jesus Christ, your Son, who is the perfect example of how we should live. For this we ask in the name of Jesus. Amen. And thank you for joining us, those of you who join us online. Don't forget to join us on Sunday at 10 o'clock.